August 16th, 1956, a man dies in a modest Hollywood apartment. Heart attack, age 73. His wife finds him on the bed. Who was this man? And why was he buried in a costume that wasn't his choice? What if I told you he saved a major film studio from bankruptcy for only $23,500? What if I told you he was the first Hollywood star to publicly admit drug addiction? And what if I told you he died during production of what would be named the worst movie ever made? Some say it was tragedy, others say it was inevitable. But what if it was something else entirely? His name was Bela Lugosi. He became cinema's most iconic monster. The studio profits were real. The hospital records exist. The Cape burial happened. But before the heart attack, before the Cape, before the worst movie ever made, there was a Hungarian revolutionary who organized the world's first film actors union and fled his country or faced execution. Today, we will hear his story. Number 1, the revolutionary who fled or faced execution. Bela Lugosi didn't just act. In Hungarian silent films, he helped organize the world's first film actors union. In March 1919, emerging as a high-profile leader who advocated against theater managers, who encouraged profit over art, when the Hungarian Soviet Republic collapsed. After just 133 days, leftists and union organizers faced the brutal White Terror. Lugosi was prescribed from acting and risked public execution if he stayed. He fled with his first wife, Ilona, to Vienna, then Berlin. During their escape, Ilona lost her unborn child. She subsequently left him and returned to her parents. The man who would become cinema's most elegant, aristocratic villain had been a leftist revolutionary who lost everything: his country, his wife, his unborn child, before arriving in America on December 4th, 1920, aboard the cargo steamship Graf Tisza István, listing badly in Atlantic storms, arriving 12 days overdue, the documented detail. Lugosi entered at New Orleans as a crew apprentice, then filed paperwork at Ellis Island on March 23, 1921, listing his occupation as sailor and reporting $100 in cash to his name. The man who would create Dracula arrived in America with less money than a week's grocery bill. But 7 years later, in 1927, the immigrant who could barely speak English would win the lead role in a Broadway production of a vampire play and memorize the entire part without understanding the words. Number 2, he memorized Dracula phonetically without understanding English when Lugosi won the lead in the 1927 Broadway production of Dracula. He had only been in America for 7 years and had learned English through theatrical work in New York's Hungarian immigrant colony. For his first major English-speaking role, he memorized the entire part, phonetically, learning the sounds without fully understanding the words. The production opened October 5th, 1927, at the Fulton Theater and ran for 261 performances in New York alone. Followed by 2 years of national touring, Lugosi estimated he played Dracula approximately 1,000 times during his lifetime. The cruel irony: despite creating the role on Broadway, Lugosi wasn't Universal's first choice for the 1931 film. The studio considered Paul Muni, Chester Morris, Ian Keith, and Conrad Veidt. Lugosi happened to be in Los Angeles with a touring company and lobbied desperately for the role, accepting a pittance of $500 per week for 7 weeks, $3,500 total, just to secure it. His co-star, Helen Chandler, was paid $750 per week. The man who created cinema's most iconic horror character accepted less than the supporting actress, but that $3,500 would save an entire studio from bankruptcy. Number 3, Dracula saved Universal Studios for $3,500. The numbers tell a story of Hollywood's most infamous underpayment. Universal Pictures was financially beleaguered after the 1929 stock market crash when Dracula opened on February 14, 1931. Within 48 hours, 50,000 tickets sold at New York's Roxy Theater alone. The film generated $700,000 in profit, the largest profit of any Universal release in 1931. Multiple historians confirm it rescued the financially troubled studio and saved Universal Pictures financially. allowing it to grow more than it ever thought possible. Lugosi's total payment: $3,500, approximately $65,000 to $70,000 in modern purchasing power, with zero residuals. Actors received no ongoing payments in that era. His agent Evan Hoskins later said, "Bela was hopping mad, and I know for a fact that he never really recovered from that, especially since the film went on to make millions for the studio. Every revival of the picture was a reminder to him that he could have been a wealthy man." 7 years later, when his son Bela Jr. was born in 1938, Lugosi couldn't pay the hospital bill and had to borrow from the Motion Picture Relief Fund. The man who saved a major studio was collecting $15 a week relief welfare by end of 1937, but in 1931, Universal wanted him for another iconic monster role, and Lugosi made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Number 4. The decision that created his own monster. In 1931, Universal wanted Lugosi to play the Frankenstein monster after Dracula's success. Director Robert Florey developed the project. With Lugosi in mind, a screen test was filmed, a poster was printed with Lugosi's name. Then, Lugosi refused. His reasons were documented by multiple biographers. The monster had no dialogue, and Lugosi was indignant that he would be stuck, portraying a mute and heavily disguised creature, capable only of grunts and growls. He reportedly called it a part for an idiot, or a tall extra. The former Hungarian matinee idol saw himself as a sexy romantic figure, not a man hiding under grotesque makeup. Boris Karloff, who had been working as a truck driver between acting jobs and had appeared in 81 films in minor roles, was spotted in the Universal commissary. He got the role. Frankenstein earned $1.4 million in profit by June 1932, outperforming even Dracula, the documented consequence in The Raven 1935. Despite Lugosi having double the screen time, he received exactly half Karloff's salary and second billing. This pattern repeated for every one of their 8 collaborations. Lugosi's wife, Lillian, said it plainly: he made the greatest mistake of his career. Bela created his own Frankenstein's monster in Karloff, a rival that would steal his fame away. By the 1950s, the man who saved Universal was broke, addicted to drugs, and weighing 125 pounds, down from 180. And then he did something unprecedented in American entertainment history. Number 5. First Hollywood star to publicly admit drug addiction. Wednesday, April 21st, 1955. Bela Lugosi did something unprecedented in American entertainment history. He voluntarily signed himself into Los Angeles General Hospital as a drug user. He was 72 years old, weighed 125 to 130 pounds, down from 180, and was described as gaunt, emaciated, looking like the ghost of a ghost. His legs looked little more than pipe stems. This was 1955. Drug addiction carried enormous stigma. No celebrity had ever publicly admitted to addiction, let alone sought treatment. Yet Lugosi gave bedside interviews to reporters in his hospital pajamas in the psychiatric ward, describing his 20-year addiction in shocking detail. When I switched to methadone, I injected 2 cubic centimeters every 2 hours. Before I went to bed, I injected 2 cubic centimeters of Demerol, and I also took barbiturate capsules so I could sleep for 8 to 10 hours. I used to inject the methadone in my legs, but I lost 50 pounds, and my limbs became just strings of muscle when I could no longer find a place to inject. That was the end. At his Friday bedside hearing, Superior Judge Wallace L. Ware said, "The court commends you for voluntarily seeking correction of the drug addiction. You are only 72 and have a good deal of life left ahead of you, provided that you live it right." Lugosi, weeping, replied, "God bless you, Judge." He was transferred to Metropolitan State Hospital in Norwalk, California, for a minimum of 3 months. During his stay, Frank Sinatra visited him with a $1,000 check. The two men had never met before, and while he was in that hospital, receiving treatment, daily letters arrived from a woman who signed them only a dash of hope. Number 6. The wife who signed her letters a dash of hope. While Lugosi underwent treatment at Metropolitan State Hospital, He received thousands of fan letters from around the world, Egypt, South Africa, and every U.S. state. Among them were daily letters from a woman who signed them only a dash of hope without revealing her name. Hope Lininger was a 40-year-old cutting room clerk at RKO Studios who had been a Lugosi fan since seeing him in Dracula in 1931. As a girl in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, she had never met him after Lugosi's release on August 5, 1955, 20 pounds heavier and pronounced fit by the medical board. He tracked her down through her return address. They married 3 weeks later, on August 24, 1955, at the home of his friend Manly P. Hall. When asked about marrying a 73-year-old former addict with no money and no career, Hope told reporters, "He doesn't have a dime, and no one but me wants him if he doesn't want to work. That is all right with me. I have a job." She became his fifth wife. He was 33 years her senior and stayed with him until his death less than a year later. But before he met Hope, before the hospital, before he hit bottom, there was Ed Wood, the worst director in Hollywood history, who paid Lugosi to wrestle a rubber octopus. Number 7. E.D. Wood paid him $1,000 to wrestle a rubber octopus. By 1952, the man who saved Universal Studios was found by director Ed Wood, living in obscurity and near poverty. Wood cast him in Glen or Glenda, 1953, shot in 4 days, paying him reportedly $1,000. Some sources say as high as $5,000, but most evidence suggests the lower figure. Film critic Leonard Maltin called Glen or Glenda possibly the worst movie ever made. Then came Bride of the Monster, 1955, Ed Wood's biggest budget, $70,000, funded by a meat packer whose son had to star as the hero. Lugosi's estimated fee, $1,000. The production required the 72-year-old former Universal star to struggle with a clearly rubber octopus prop in a small water tank. The documented kindness, despite the terrible films. Lugosi and Wood developed a genuine friendship. Wood visited him regularly, helped him through his worst depression and addiction, and remained loyal when the rest of Hollywood had forgotten Lugosi entirely. When Lugosi entered drug rehabilitation in 1955, Wood and the Bride of the Monster cast visited him in the hospital with a script for a new project. The contrast is devastating. From $700,000 profit, Dracula, to $1,000 rubber octopus films. In 24 years, from Universal star to Ed Wood poverty, and when Lugosi died in August 1956, during production of that new project, Ed Wood had a problem. He needed more footage, but his star was dead. Number 8. The chiropractor who became Dracula's face, Bela Lugosi, died on August 16, 1956, during production of what would become Plan 9 from Outer Space. Ed Wood had shot less than 5 usable minutes of silent footage of Lugosi, the actor weeping at a funeral, picking a rose, walking with cape spread dramatically. The film required many more scenes. Wood's solution, his wife, Kathy's chiropractor, Tom Mason, would serve as Lugosi's double. The problem was immediately apparent. Mason was significantly taller than Lugosi, described as about a foot taller, thinner, and considerably younger than the 73-year-old actor he was replacing. Wood's solution. Mason hunched over in every scene and held the cape over his face at all times. This may actually be the origin of the iconic Dracula with cape over face image that has persisted in popular culture. The stereotypical vampire pose was born from desperation to hide an obvious mismatch, the documented absurdity. In one scene, Mason's cape starts to fall. He visibly pulls it back over his shoulders. No explanation is ever given in the film for why the character suddenly begins hiding his face. The switch between full-faced Lugosi footage and obscured Mason footage is jarring, even to casual viewers. But that terrible film would eventually make Lugosi immortal. Number 9. Worst movie ever made him immortal. Plan 9 from Outer Space was released in July 1959, 3 years after Lugosi's death. It played on late-night television in relative obscurity for 2 decades. Then in 1980, Harry and Michael Medved published the Golden Turkey Awards through reader voting, the book named Plan 9 from Outer Space, the worst film of all time, and Ed Wood, the worst director of all time. The result was the opposite of what one might expect. Fans flocked to see the disaster. For themselves, midnight movie screenings proliferated. The so bad it's good phenomenon was born. In 1994, Tim Burton directed Ed Wood, starring Johnny Depp. Martin Landau played Lugosi. Researching by watching 25 to 35 Lugosi films and studying his Hungarian accent, Landau's statement about the role captures the tragedy and redemption. I began to respect this guy and pity him. I saw the humor in him. This, for me, became a love letter to him. I got a chance to make a comeback in my career, and I'm giving him one. I'm giving him the last role he never got. At the 1995 Academy Awards, Martin Landau won Best Supporting Actor for playing Lugosi, the man who died forgotten, in poverty, during the worst movie ever made, received posthumous recognition through the hands of another actor 39 years later. But the most famous detail about Lugosi's death, that he was buried in his Dracula cape, isn't quite true, at least not the way people think. Number 10. Buried in the cape, but not his choice. 3 nights before his death, Lugosi sat on the edge of his bed in his modest Herald Way apartment. His wife, Hope, asked if he were still afraid to die. He told me that he was. She later told reporters he was terrified of death. On August 16, 1956, at approximately 6:45 p.m., Hope returned from work to find him dead in his bedroom from coronary occlusion with myocardial fibrosis, a heart attack. He was 73 years old. The famous detail everyone knows: Bela Lugosi was buried in his Dracula cape. The detail almost no one knows: it wasn't his choice. His 1954 will contains no mention of burial wishes. Regarding the cape, the decision was made by his 4th wife, Lillian, and his son, Bela Jr., who believed it is what his father would have wanted, and the cape wasn't even the original. The iconic 1931 black wool cape with taupe silk lining remained with the family for over 80 years before being donated to the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures. In 2019, Lugosi was buried in a lighter weight cape used for personal appearances. Ed Wood served as a pallbearer. Boris Karloff did not attend. He wasn't in California. The funeral was held August 18, 1956, at Utter McKinley Mortuary Chapel in Hollywood. The final documented numbers: Lugosi was paid $3,500 for creating cinema's most iconic vampire. He died with $1,900 in the bank. His estate was worth less than $2,000. 4th wife, Lillian, paid for the cemetery plot and headstone. 5th wife, Hope, paid for the casket. He lies at Holy Cross Cemetery in Culver City, plot L120, grave 1, grotto section, 3 rows directly in front of the stairs to the grotto, sharing the section with Bing Crosby and Sharon Tate. His headstone reads simply, "Beloved Father, revolutionary fugitive who organized the world's first film actors union and fled execution, immigrant who arrived with $100, memorized Dracula phonetically without understanding English, saved Universal Studios for $3,500, then couldn't pay his son's hospital bill, turned down Frankenstein because it was beneath him, created his own rival in Karloff, first Hollywood star to publicly admit drug addiction when it was career suicide, reduced to wrestling, rubber octopuses for $1,000 per film, died during production of the worst movie ever made, doubled by a chiropractor, holding a cape over his face, buried in a costume that wasn't his choice, won a posthumous Oscar through another actor 39 years later. Bela Lugosi's story proves something nobody wants to admit. You can save a major studio, create cinema's most iconic monster, and still die with less money than you arrived with. The immigrant who fled execution spent 37 years building Hollywood's most elegant villain, and Hollywood broke him for it. He said it himself from the hospital ward. "When my wife and my son went away, it broke my heart. I went back on the drugs. My heart was broken." The man who became Dracula died of a broken heart, wearing $1,900 worth of dignity. If Bela Lugosi's journey from Hungarian revolutionary to Dracula To Ed Wood, Poverty Moved You, you're going to want to see next week's video. We're covering another Hollywood legend who lived an impossible life. Your generation remembers, but never knew the truth behind. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. And if you've got your own memories of seeing Dracula on late-night TV or Plan 9 at midnight screenings, share them in the comments. I read every single one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.